It was a regular night, or at least it started that way. The kind of night where you sink into the couch, watching mindless TV shows, just trying to unwind after a long week. Sarah, like many of us, had no reason to believe this evening would be any different from the others. Little did she know, the series of events that began that night would leave her questioning reality itself. It all began when her phone rang. It wasn't an unknown number, but it wasn't anyone she knew well either. The name on the screen read, "Blocked number." Sarah hesitated before answering, a slight unease creeping up her spine. Still, she thought nothing of it. Maybe it was someone from work or a call she had forgotten to return. She swiped the screen and put the phone to her ear. "Hello?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, silence, thick and oppressive. Sarah was about to hang up when a voice finally spoke. "Sarah, it's been a long time." Her heart skipped a beat. The voice was unfamiliar, but it carried an eerie familiarity. She furrowed her brow, trying to place it. It sounded distant, almost muffled, but unmistakable in its tone. "Who is this?" she asked, a sense of dread creeping into her chest. "You don't recognize me?" The voice laughed softly, a dry, unsettling chuckle that sent chills down her spine. "You should. We've met before." Sarah's pulse quickened. She felt a cold sweat bead on her forehead. Her mind raced, trying to recall if she had ever heard that voice before, but nothing came to mind. "I don't know you," she replied, her voice shaky. "Oh, you do," the voice said, growing darker now. "I'm the one you didn't listen to. I'm the one you forgot." The line went silent again. Sarah's fingers trembled as she gripped the phone. Her brain was trying to make sense of what was happening. Could it be a prank? She glanced around the room, the normal surroundings feeling suddenly foreign, as if something in the atmosphere had shifted. She couldn't explain it, but there was a palpable tension in the air. "Who is this?" she repeated, now more demanding, trying to hold on to control. "You don't remember me?" The voice was amused now, almost mocking. "Let me remind you, I'm the one you ignored when you should have listened. The one you walked away from. The one who needed you, but you were too busy, too distracted." "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah said, her voice growing more frantic. "What do you want?" The voice fell into a slow, deliberate rhythm, as though savoring each word, taking its time to savor the fear it was instilling in her. "Sarah, you don't remember, but I remember everything. I remember the way you left me, the way you turned your back, but it doesn't matter. We'll be seeing each other soon." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Sarah's heart thudded painfully in her chest, her mind spinning. She tried to shake off the feeling, tried to tell herself it was just a cruel joke. But there was something about the way the voice spoke, something about the tone that felt too real, too sinister. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with panic. The voice didn't respond. Instead, there was a strange noise, like the sound of static, followed by a low, drawn-out hum. It was as if the phone was picking up something from the other side of the world. The sound was unnerving, and Sarah could feel her breath quicken as the unease settled deep in her bones. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the call ended. The line went dead. Sarah stood frozen, phone pressed to her ear, as though waiting for the voice to come back. But it didn't. The silence that followed was suffocating. She sat down on the couch, trying to gather her thoughts. What had just happened? Who was that? And what did they mean by, "We'll be seeing each other soon"? 100 different scenarios ran through her mind, but none of them made any sense. Her phone buzzed in her hand, jolting her out of her thoughts. Another notification. She looked down, expecting to see a message from a friend or an update from social media. But instead, there was something else. A photo. It was a picture of her apartment, not a recent one. This was an older photo, taken months ago. She knew this because the couch she was sitting on wasn't the same one she had now. The room looked different too. But the most chilling part was that the photo had been taken from the corner of the room where she sat now. The corner where she always sat on nights like this. And someone had been there, watching her. Her stomach twisted as she felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Who had taken this photo? Who had been in her apartment? She quickly tapped the phone screen to open the message. It was another image. This time it was of her own face. The photo had been taken while she was sitting on the couch, but she hadn't heard anyone enter. No one had been there. The photo showed her looking up, her eyes wide with fear, as though she had sensed something. But she hadn't been aware of anything at the time. Not until now. The terror was overwhelming now. She needed to leave, to get out of the apartment. But every inch of her body was frozen, paralyzed by fear. She couldn't move. Another message came through. This one was a video. Her hands shook as she opened it. The video began with the familiar image of her apartment, but it was different this time. The lighting was dim, the shadows long. The camera moved slowly, carefully, as though the person behind it was hiding in the darkness. The camera lingered on the living room, showing the empty space she had been sitting in just moments ago. Then, the camera slowly zoomed in on the corner of the room, the same corner where she had sat before. But this time, there was something in the corner. A figure, barely visible, just a shadow, standing still. It was the shape of a person, but its features were obscured by the darkness. The figure stood motionless, watching her, waiting. The video cut off abruptly. Sarah dropped her phone, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She knew, with every fiber of her being, that the person in the video was real. Whoever this was, they were here. They were watching her. A loud banging noise suddenly echoed from the other side of her apartment. It was a series of knocks, sharp and insistent. Someone was at the door. Her heart skipped. She didn't know what to do. Should she open it? Should she run? The air felt thick, heavy, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. Her hand hovered over the door handle, but her body refused to obey. Another knock, louder this time, and then the voice, from behind her, cold and sharp. "Sarah, you didn't think I would let you forget, did you?" She spun around, but there was no one there. The room seemed to shift, the shadows deepening in every corner. Sarah's breath came in shallow gasps as she turned, desperate to find the source of the voice. But the apartment remained empty. The silence was deafening, but it was laced with a sinister undertone. Another knock, louder now, almost desperate. Sarah's heart pounded as she stumbled back toward the door. There was no way she could ignore it this time. Whoever or whatever was out there, they wanted her to open it. She swallowed hard, her fingers trembling as she reached for the door handle. The knock came again, sharp and impatient, as if the person behind the door had been waiting forever for her to act. "Sarah?" The voice was closer now. The sound sent ice-cold chills running through her veins. It was as if the person or thing was standing right behind her, breathing down her neck. Her pulse raced. She had to act. "Who is it?" she croaked, her voice barely audible. No response, only the deafening silence that seemed to scream at her. The knocking continued. Insistent, relentless. Without thinking, Sarah swung the door open. Her breath hitched in her throat, her eyes scanning the empty hallway outside. But there was no one there. No one in sight. The hallway was dimly lit, eerily quiet. The silence stretched on, almost mocking her. Her heart raced as she stepped out cautiously, peering down the dark corridor. The lights flickered, casting strange shadows that seemed to move in the corners of her vision. There was nothing. Nothing but the creeping dread that slithered under her skin. "Where are you?" she whispered to herself, half hoping for an answer, half terrified of one. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. She snapped it up, her fingers trembling as she unlocked the screen. The message was simple, chilling, and direct. "Look behind you." Her stomach turned, her body paralyzed with fear. The words echoed in her mind like a dark mantra. Slowly, hesitantly, she turned around, her eyes wide in horror, and there it was, the shadow. It was no longer a vague shape in the darkness. It had taken form, an indistinct silhouette of a figure, tall and lanky, its features obscured by the shadows but unmistakably human. It stood motionless in the doorway to her apartment, staring at her with a presence that made her blood run cold. "Who are you?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a breath. But the figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching her. Her mind screamed at her to run, to flee, but her feet were glued to the floor. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure stepped forward into the hallway. Slowly, methodically, Sarah's heart leapt into her throat. She instinctively backed away, her feet scrambling to find purchase. But there was no way out. The figure was blocking her escape. "Sarah," the voice again. This time it was clearer, closer, and it wasn't coming from the figure. It was coming from the air itself, as if the room was speaking to her. "Don't you remember?" it whispered. "We were always meant to be together." Sarah's mind reeled. No, this isn't real. This isn't happening. But the figure was moving closer. It was in front of her now, its form becoming more distinct, yet still somehow wrong. The figure had no face, just a smooth, featureless surface where its eyes and mouth should have been. And then the voice spoke again. But this time, it wasn't from the figure. It was from inside her head. "You left me. You left me behind." The words echoed like a painful memory, one that Sarah could not recall but felt deep within her bones. A memory from her past, something buried so deep it was almost lost to time. And yet, it felt as if she had known this voice all her life. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering her question. Then it took a slow, deliberate step forward, and another. Its presence seemed to fill the hallway, overwhelming her senses. "I want you, Sarah." The voice was soft but unyielding. "I want you to remember." A flash of light, white, blinding, flashed before her eyes, as if she had been struck by a sudden realization. In that instant, memories rushed back to her, memories she had long tried to bury. Faces, places, moments from her past that had been wiped clean, and the figure, now she knew who it was. It was him, the one she had forgotten, the one she had left behind, her older brother, the one who had disappeared, never to return. And in that moment she understood. He hadn't disappeared. He had stayed. He had been with her the whole time. She recoiled in horror, staggering back as the weight of the revelation crashed down on her. Her brother, he had died years ago in a car accident, but he had never truly left. He had been watching her, following her, haunting her memories. His spirit, trapped in the space between worlds, had clung to her, and now he was here, demanding that she remember. Tears blurred her vision as the figure reached out toward her. His hand, cold, skeletal, gripped her arm with a force that felt like death itself. "I never wanted to leave you," the voice whispered, "but you abandoned me." "No," Sarah screamed, pulling away with all her strength. But it was too late. The figure's grip tightened, its presence overwhelming. And then everything went black. When Sarah woke, it was morning. The sunlight filtered through her blinds, casting a soft, warm glow over her apartment. The room was quiet still. She felt disoriented, confused, as if she had just woken from a terrible dream. Her body ached, her head throbbed with the remnants of a nightmare. But then, her eyes flicked to the corner of the room, the same corner where she had been sitting the night before. And there it was, the photo. It had changed. This time it wasn't an old photo of her apartment or her face. No, this time it was a new picture. A picture of her brother, the one who had been gone all these years. His eyes were wide, staring directly into the camera. His face was pale, his expression unreadable. But there was something else. In the corner of the frame, there was a small message scrawled in blood-red ink. "I'm still here." The room felt suffocating again. Her breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her. He never left. He was still here, watching, waiting, and she knew in that moment that she would never be free.